Politicians, bureaucrats, and their ideological accomplices always seem to offer a bounty of deceptions and deceptive lingo. And if it's taken you perhaps a month to recover from all the whoppers contained in the first Biden 2024 ad, especially its claim that old Joe engaged in passing laws that
make us more energy independent.
Well, get ready for another Biden-created insult to your intelligence and another attack on your wallet. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC TV. You know, before we dig into this, I should mention that this coming as it does on the heels of new personal consumption price index numbers showing the highest price spike in 7 months, driven in large part by inflated Federal Reserve created cash chasing an insufficient petrochemical energy supply. The new Biden lockdown of offshore drilling permits seems almost like an overtly big government middle finger shoved in front of every one of us. Nick Pope reports for the Daily Caller News Foundation that Biden's Interior Department Friday announced their offshore plan, quote, which allows for 3 offshore oil and gas sales through 2029, with sales in 2025, 2027, and 2029. 3? That schedule represents the lowest number of sales that the administration could have pursued while maintaining its ability to push offshore wind development under provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, and it is the smallest number of oil and gas lease sales in history, according to Interior Secretary Deb Haaland. The Biden-Harris administration is committed to building a clean energy future that ensures America's energy independence, Haaland said of the schedule's release. The decision is in line with the Biden administration's sweeping climate agenda, which aims to reach net zero carbon dioxide emissions in the U.S. energy sector by 2035 and for the entire U.S. economy by 2050. End quote. The net zero carbon dioxide emissions target being not only unconstitutional and tyrannical, but also based on zero actual evidence that A, the globe is catastrophically warming due to man's activities, or B, that if it were, CO2 is actually a driver of higher temps in Earth's atmospheric biological exchange system. Simply put, Ms. Haaland's haughty claim that these government meddlers are building any kind of energy independence into our future is laughably insulting. 3? The act of restricting the commercial acquisition of energy-providing resources in the nation's oceans, as they say, is kind of a titanic tell to the whole fraud. And, of course, we're not the only ones noticing it. Writes Pope, quote, the release of the U.S. offshore leasing program, mandated by law and long overdue, is an utter failure for the country. National Ocean Industries Association President Eric Melito said of the schedule, the White House simply ignores our energy realities in once again limiting U.S. energy production opportunities. With global demand at record levels and continuing to rise, regressive policies like this serve to harm Americans of all walks of life. The plan is deliberately designed to phase down offshore oil and gas in the Gulf of Mexico, according to the DOI. Offshore oil production in federally controlled Gulf waters accounted for about 15% of total U.S. crude oil output in 2021, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, end quote. As I've noted for MRC TV, the U.S. Constitution doesn't allow the feds to control Gulf waters or any other kind of waters. But of course, the act of claiming control over these areas gives politicians and bureaucrats power over us and over businesses that will have to play nice as the Bidenistas steer centrally planned energy policy over all of our lives. And of course, there's not supposed to be any such thing as energy policy from the government in a free society. They're going to steer it towards whatever unicorn-based fuel future they desire. And of course, this act is inimical to human liberty and prosperity. Pope reminds us that we're not alone in noticing the anti-energy independence and prosperity acts of this Biden agenda and all of the supporters of him in bureaucracy and media and universities. We're not alone when we recall that this is one more move across a chessboard the feds control along with all of their friends and on which we shouldn't have to be stuck at all. Quote, at a time when inflation runs rampant across the country, the Biden administration is choosing failed energy policies that are adding to the pain Americans are feeling at the pump, American Petroleum Institute President and CEO Mike Summers said of the schedule. This restrictive offshore leasing program is the latest tactic in a coordinated strategy to reduce energy production, ultimately weakening America's energy dominance, limiting consumers' access to affordable, reliable energy, and compromising our ability to lead on the global stage, end quote. And this recent plan from the Biden DOI might better be understood for the evil that it is if one gets a multi-year perspective on the dark tyranny of Biden administration's so-called energy policy attacks. For that, let me liberally quote from work I offered in September of 2022. Quote, since day one of the Biden administration, when Joe nixed the Keystone XL pipeline, to his stoppage of new offshore oil and gas exploration leases, to his most recent move to unconstitutionally ban Russian energy imports, which, by the way, has not harmed Russia in the least, since Chinese-tied energy companies are buying the Russian LNG, liquid natural gas, at a ruble discount, then reselling it to those pro-Ukraine European nation states and giving both the Russians and Chinese hefty profits. Well, the Biden administration has engaged in a systematic carry-through of Biden's campaign promise to try to destroy the U.S. oil and gas industries.
No more subsidies for fossil fuel industry. No more drilling on federal lands. No more drilling, including offshore. No ability for the oil industry to continue to drill, period. Ends.
And all at the expense of not only the energy industries, but at the expense of our ability to better or sustain our standards of living. Americans for Prosperity started an ongoing list of these poisonous Biden administration policies in December of 2021, and they kept updating it through June of this year, with 25 ways Joe and his chums have used government aggression to stifle energy supply and raise prices. The Bidenistas threw these policies in our faces even as they spewed lies about energy independence and falsely implied that any lack of petrochemical energy was the fault of the oil and natural gas companies. As I wrote in 2022, quote, even as the DC hacks have engaged in this mafia-like intercession between us and those with whom we could and possibly would like to exchange for energy, even as inflation has teamed up with all of their dumb claims of Delphic, we know the energy of the future genius, the Bidenistas also have engaged in one of the most extended gaslighting campaigns since they blamed the so-called pandemic on the unvaccinated. Their gaslighting agents included former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, who in March absurdly claimed that the administration was not hobbling energy exploration, implying that it was the oil and gas companies' greed that saw them not moving to explore. A claim that was ripped to shreds by people who actually make their livings in the field. There's a great deal more in that piece, so please feel free to check it out at mrctv.org. For now, let's be sure to note that not only is Biden ready to shut down energy resource discovery and capture in the waters the feds unconstitutionally claim to control, even 100 miles beyond the soil of various states, Biden just reneged on an important prior federal arrangement to permit oil and natural gas exploration and recovery in Alaska. It was just September 6th that Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy, a Republican, released a fiery announcement about Biden's insulting, unconstitutional move. Quote, "Today, the Biden administration announced that it is canceling legally issued leases for oil and gas in the section of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge designated for oil and gas development. The Secretary of the Department of the Interior has the authority to cancel oil and gas leases issued in violation of statute or regulation, but there's no such violation in the ANWR leases. The leases that the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority hold were issued properly as mandated by Congress in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, end quote. And this assumes that even the federal power to control any of that land in Alaska is constitutional, which it is not. As I've mentioned for MRC TV, the U.S. Constitution only allows the feds to control 3 kinds of land: a 10 square mile area for the capital, currently Washington, D.C., military garrisons, and territories. And when territories become states, the Constitution mandates that they enter with all the so-called rights and privileges of all states. Even if the states could cede land to the feds, the U.S. government would have no constitutional power to run those lands. And that also applies to areas off the coasts of all the states. So, this move by Biden not only helps us see just how weasel-like and prone to lying he and his team are, it also reveals their larger climate cult agenda to cut into the future of our natural gas purchases and corporate production. And it lets us see that none of it is sanctioned at all by their U.S. Constitution. Even if the Constitution were amended to allow it, such tyranny over us and our attempts to provide energy to our homes, cars, businesses, and machines, to our lives in general, well, such attempts to control that would be utterly despicable, as, of course, are all political power claims over us and our neighbors. Thanks for watching, one and all. Please like and subscribe and join us at Rumble, where they don't censor us providing information and messages like this. Please share these with friends and, of course, with students who might be interested in the Constitution or economics or political rhetoric. And please visit us at mrctv.org. That's mrctv.org, where the whole team is doing its work. And, of course, while you're there, visit the MRC store to get some great items and consider donating to the Media Research Center in its 36th year, fighting the left-wing bias out there. You can find us on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Parler, and on Twitter/X. And on Gab, I'm at Gardner Goldsmith, and on Twitter, I'm at Gard Goldsmith. Thanks for watching, one and all. For MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.